Ken Curtis is remembered by millions as the warm, rough-edged Deputy Festus Hagen from the long-running television series Gunsmoke. To many viewers, he seemed like the kind of man who lived the same honest, simple life on screen that he played each week. His slow speech, scratchy voice, and country humor made him feel real and comforting, like someone you might meet in a small town. Yet behind that familiar image was a far more complex man, shaped by a hard childhood, strong principles, and years of quiet tension inside Hollywood. While Ken Curtis was never known for public arguments or loud feuds, his life was not free of conflict. Like many actors working in a competitive industry, he faced jealousy, creative disagreements, and personal disappointment. These moments rarely made headlines because Curtis preferred silence over drama. Still, people who worked around him noticed that not every relationship was easy. Over time, stories emerged about certain actors and producers he struggled with the most. These were not explosive hatreds filled with shouting or revenge, but slow-burning frustrations that stayed with him for years. Understanding these conflicts requires first understanding the man himself. Ken Curtis grew up in a very unusual way, living above a county jail where his father worked as sheriff and his mother cooked for prisoners. This early exposure to hardship and discipline shaped his calm, grounded personality. It also taught him to observe rather than react, to hold his feelings close instead of displaying them openly. This habit followed him into adulthood and into Hollywood, where egos often clashed loudly. Curtis chose a different path. He rarely complained in public, even when he felt wronged. Instead, his frustrations appeared quietly in moments where he stepped back, refused offers, or accepted situations he did not fully agree with. To the outside world, he seemed easygoing. Inside, however, he carried strong opinions about fairness, respect, and recognition. These values would later play a major role in his strained relationships with several people connected to Gunsmoke. While some fans today use strong words like hate, the truth is more subtle. Curtis was not a bitter man, but he was deeply sensitive to being overlooked or undervalued. His story shows how even the calmest figures can carry long-lasting emotional weight beneath the surface. Before Ken Curtis ever stepped onto the dusty streets of Dodge City, his life followed a path that was far from glamorous. Born Curtis Wayne Gates in 1916 in Lamar, Colorado, he spent much of his childhood inside a jailhouse because his father was the county sheriff. This was not a metaphor. The family literally lived above the jail, instead of playgrounds and parks. Young Ken grew up around iron bars, locked doors, and the steady presence of people who had made serious mistakes. His mother worked as the jail's cook, preparing meals for prisoners as well as her own family. Watching her serve food through the bars gave Ken an early lesson in compassion and dignity. He learned that people were more than their worst moments. This background made him thoughtful and slow to judge others, but it also made him value respect very deeply. As he grew older, Ken showed strong musical talent, especially in singing. Still, during the Great Depression, dreams were risky. His parents pushed him toward a stable future, and he briefly studied medicine in college. Even there, however, his heart was not in it. Music kept pulling him back, and eventually he chose to follow that calling. This decision required courage and confidence, traits that would later help him survive Hollywood. His early career as a singer with Tommy Dorsey's band, and later with the Sons of the Pioneers, taught him discipline and teamwork. Music groups require cooperation, patience, and the ability to share the spotlight. These experiences shaped how Curtis later approached acting. He did not arrive in Hollywood expecting to be the center of attention. Instead, he worked steadily, respected the process, and trusted that good work would speak for itself. When he finally transitioned into acting, he brought with him the habits of a musician. Show up prepared, do your part, and don't cause trouble. These values earned him respect, but they also placed him in difficult positions when others around him fought harder for attention or control. Curtis did not enjoy conflict, but he also did not like feeling invisible. This quiet struggle would become more noticeable once he joined Gunsmoke, a show already dominated by strong personalities and fixed power structures. When Ken Curtis joined Gunsmoke in 1964, the series was already a massive success. James Arness had become a television icon as Marshal Matt Dillon, and the show revolved largely around his character. Curtis entered this world as Festus Hagen, a rough deputy meant to appear in only one episode. To everyone's surprise, audiences loved him instantly. Festus felt fresh, human, and different from the usual polished television heroes. His popularity grew quickly, and before long, he became a regular part of the show. While this success was good for Curtis, it also placed him in a delicate position. James Arness was not just a lead actor. He was the face of Gunsmoke. The show's identity was tied to him, and the spotlight rarely shifted. Some fans and insiders believe that Curtis felt frustrated by always being second to Arness, no matter how much viewers adored Festus. There is no solid evidence that the two men openly disliked each other, and on screen their chemistry was excellent. Still, being constantly compared to a towering star like Arness could wear on anyone. Curtis had created a character that many fans connected with on a deep level, yet awards, media attention, and leadership always flowed toward a Marshal. For a man who valued fairness, this imbalance may have quietly hurt. Curtis never publicly complained, but those close to production sensed tension. It was not personal hatred as much as a feeling of being trapped in someone else's shadow. Curtis respected Arness, but respect does not erase frustration. Over time, this dynamic became one of the unspoken realities of the show. Curtis continued to give his best performance, choosing professionalism over resentment. His silence, however, should not be mistaken for complete contentment. Like many supporting actors on long-running series, he had to accept limits placed on his growth, even when the audience clearly wanted more from him. Another relationship that carried quiet tension was between Ken Curtis and Milburn Stone, the actor who played Doc Adams. Stone had been part of Gunsmoke from the very beginning, and was deeply protective of the show's tone and balance. By the time Curtis joined the cast, the group had already developed a rhythm that worked. Introducing a new character who quickly gained popularity naturally created pressure. According to behind-the-scenes stories, Curtis and Stone sometimes disagreed about scripts and character focus. Both men were strong-willed, though they expressed it differently. Stone was known to speak his mind directly, while Curtis preferred to keep his thoughts private. When screen time or story direction became an issue, their differences in communication style may have caused friction. These disagreements never exploded into public fights, but they created an undercurrent that people on set noticed. Interestingly, this tension may have helped their performances. The sharp exchanges between Doc and Festus often felt real, because, in some ways, they were. Curtis and Stone remained professional, always delivering strong scenes together. Still, the situation highlights how even successful collaborations can hide personal strain. Curtis respected Stone's experience, but he also wanted room for his own character to grow. Balancing those desires in a long-running show is never easy. For Curtis, who joined later and worked hard to prove himself, any resistance could feel like a closed door. Once again, he chose not to speak out publicly, reinforcing his image as a calm and cooperative actor. Yet silence does not erase feeling, and these moments added to the quiet weight he carried throughout his years on Gunsmoke. The most direct and noticeable conflict in Ken Curtis's career involved producer John Manley. Unlike the tensions with fellow actors, this struggle was rooted in power, money, and creative control. Manley was known for running Gunsmoke with a firm hand. He managed budgets carefully and resisted changes that might disrupt the show's formula. Curtis, on the other hand, believed that Festus had grown into a central figure who deserved more development and fair pay. As Festus became more popular, Curtis felt that his contribution was not being fully recognized behind the scenes. Reports from people close to the production suggest that Curtis and Manley clashed multiple times over these issues. Curtis wanted his character to evolve and receive the same respect given to other main cast members. Manley did not always agree. This created a classic conflict between artist and management. Curtis was not demanding fame for its own sake. He wanted balance and acknowledgement for years of steady work. These disagreements became more serious than simple rumors. People on set noticed the tension, and it followed Curtis even after Gunsmoke ended. Years later, when CBS planned a reunion movie, Curtis was invited back as Festus. However, the salary offer was far lower than he felt was appropriate. Remembering past struggles over respect and pay, Curtis refused. This decision shocked fans but revealed his strong principles. He chose dignity over nostalgia, even though he knew it would disappoint viewers. This moment stands as one of the clearest examples of how deeply those earlier conflicts affected him. Curtis may not have used harsh words, but his actions spoke clearly. Some of the more talked about rumors surrounding Ken Curtis involve his relationship with Amanda Blake, who played Miss Kitty. Blake was one of the most beloved characters on Gunsmoke and had been a central figure for many years. As Festus grew in popularity, some fans in tabloids suggested that Blake felt threatened or annoyed by the attention Curtis received. There is little solid proof to support this idea, and it is possible that the rivalry was exaggerated by outsiders looking for drama. What is clear is that both actors were professionals. Their scenes together were warm, natural, and convincing. If there was tension, it never appeared on screen. Curtis rarely commented on Blake in interviews, which fits his general pattern of avoiding public conflict. It is important to remember that long-running shows often create strange pressures. Actors compete not just for screen time, but for relevance as the show evolves. Curtis entering the cast during a later season changed the balance, whether anyone intended it or not. Blake had carried the show through many years, and sharing attention could be difficult for anyone. Still, labeling the situation as hatred is misleading. At most, it appears to have been a quiet rivalry shaped by changing roles and audience reactions. Curtis did not seek to outshine Blake. He simply played his role as honestly as he could. The fact that fans still debate their relationship decades later shows how invested audiences become in the lives of actors they admire. In reality, Curtis seemed more focused on doing good work than on competing with his co-stars. Another name often mentioned in discussions about Ken Curtis's struggles is Dennis Weaver, who played Chester Good, the original deputy on Gunsmoke. Weaver left the show before Curtis joined, but his presence lingered in the minds of fans. When Curtis took over the deputy role, comparisons were immediate and unavoidable. Chester had been loved for his limp, nervous charm, while Festus was rougher and more outspoken. Some viewers preferred one over the other, and this debate followed Curtis for years. There is no evidence that Curtis personally disliked Weaver, but the shadow of Weaver's success may have weighed on him. Stepping into a role previously filled by a popular actor is never easy. Curtis had to prove himself while also honoring what came before. This pressure could easily turn into quiet resentment, not toward the person, but toward the situation itself. Curtis handled it by fully committing to Festus as a unique character. Over time, audiences accepted and loved him just as much. Still, the constant comparisons were a reminder that he was always being measured against someone else's legacy. For a man who valued individuality and fairness, this could be frustrating. Curtis never publicly blamed Weaver or spoke negatively about him. Instead, he focused on making Festus his own. This approach reflects Curtis's character. Meet challenges with effort, not complaints. Beyond Gunsmoke, Ken Curtis lived a rich personal life that helped balance the frustrations of his career. After 2 early marriages that ended quietly, he found lasting happiness with his third wife, Tori. She was not part of Hollywood and had no interest in fame, which suited Curtis perfectly. With her, he found peace and stability. This relationship softened him and gave him a safe place away from professional pressures. Tori encouraged him to enjoy life beyond acting, and together they built a home centered on family and simple pleasures. Curtis became a devoted stepfather to Tori's children and valued this role deeply. As his acting career slowed, he did not chase attention or attempt reinvention. Instead, he chose meaningful roles and personal contentment. His later years were spent traveling, attending small Western events, and enjoying the quiet recognition of fans who appreciate his work. When health issues arose, Tori remained by his side, offering support without seeking sympathy or publicity. Curtis's death in 1991 was peaceful, fitting the way he had lived. He passed away at home, away from cameras and headlines. His ashes were scattered in Colorado, returning him to the land that shaped him. This ending reflects the man he was, grounded, private, and deeply connected to his roots. Looking back, it becomes clear that Ken Curtis's so-called hatreds were not driven by anger or cruelty. Instead, they were shaped by disappointment, pride, and a desire for respect. Hollywood often rewards those who speak the loudest, but Curtis chose a quieter path. This choice protected his dignity, but sometimes left his frustrations unresolved. His conflict with producers over pay, his position in the shadow of bigger stars, and the constant comparisons all contributed to a sense of being undervalued at times. Yet, Curtis never allowed these feelings to poison his work. He remained consistent, professional, and committed to his craft. This is why fans remember him so fondly. His story reminds us that success does not erase struggle. Even beloved figures carry private burdens. Curtis's life shows the cost of silence, but also its strength. By refusing to engage in public feuds, he preserved his image and his peace. The tensions he experienced were real, but they did not define him. Instead, they highlight the challenges faced by many supporting actors who give their best without always receiving equal recognition. Ken Curtis's legacy is one of quiet strength, honesty, and dedication. While modern headlines may use dramatic language to describe his relationships, the truth is far more human and relatable. He was not a man driven by hatred, but by values. When those values were challenged, he felt it deeply, even if he rarely spoke about it. His life teaches an important lesson about dignity in difficult environments. Hollywood can be loud and unforgiving, yet Curtis navigated it with grace. He left behind a body of work that continues to comfort and inspire audiences. Festus Hagen remains one of television's most memorable characters because Curtis infused him with real emotion and lived experience. Understanding the quiet conflict behind that performance adds depth to our appreciation. In the end, Ken Curtis will be remembered not for who he struggled with, but for the calm, steady presence he brought to the screen and to those who knew him. His story is proof that strength does not always shout, and that sometimes the most meaningful lives are lived just out of the spotlight, as the years passed after Gunsmoke ended. Ken Curtis's relationship with fame continued to evolve in a quiet and thoughtful way. Unlike many actors who struggled when the spotlight faded, Curtis seemed almost relieved to step back. He had already achieved what mattered most to him: steady work, respect from audiences, and a character that would live on long after the final episode aired. Still, stepping away did not mean he forgot the lessons or tensions of his career. In private conversations, Curtis was known to reflect on how Hollywood often treats people as replaceable parts rather than human beings. He believed loyalty should work both ways, and when it didn't, the disappointment lingered. This belief helps explain many of the strained relationships later attributed to him. Curtis was not angry at individuals as much as he was frustrated with systems that rewarded power over contribution. He had watched actors come and go, seen characters rise and fall in importance, and experienced firsthand how popularity did not always translate into respect behind the scenes. These experiences shaped his later decisions, including his refusal to return to Gunsmoke under conditions he felt were unfair. To Curtis, this was not stubbornness, it was self-respect. He felt that saying no was sometimes the only way to protect one's dignity. Fans who understood his reasoning admired him even more for it. In interviews, Curtis rarely criticized anyone by name, choosing instead to speak in general terms about fairness and gratitude. This restraint made his words more powerful. People listening closely could sense the weight of experience behind his calm tone. As time went on, Curtis found fulfillment in smaller joys, such as meeting fans at Western festivals, sharing stories, and hearing how Festus had comforted people during difficult times. These moments reminded him that his work mattered beyond studio politics and contract disputes. They also softened any lingering bitterness he may have felt. By focusing on connection rather than conflict, Curtis gradually let go of old frustrations. His later life shows that peace does not come from winning arguments, but from choosing what deserves your energy. In this way, Ken Curtis closed the final chapter of his life not as a man defined by feuds, but as one who learned when to stand firm and when to let go. Ken Curtis's legacy within television history cannot be fully understood without looking at how audiences responded to him long after his active years had ended. While awards and headlines often focus on leading men, Curtis's impact grew quietly through reruns, syndication, and word of mouth. New generations discovered Gunsmoke decades later and found themselves drawn not just to the strong authority of Marshall Dillon, but to the humanity of Festus Hagen. Festus felt approachable in a way few television characters did. He made mistakes, spoke plainly, and reacted with genuine emotion. This connection is a key reason Curtis's work aged so well. It also explains why discussions about his supposed dislikes or conflicts continue to surface. Fans tend to look for dramatic explanations behind beloved performances, imagining that strong characters must be fueled by equally strong emotions off-screen. In Curtis's case, the truth is quieter and more grounded. His performance strength came not from anger, but from life experience. Having grown up around hardship, authority, and human weakness, he understood people deeply. This understanding allowed him to bring realism to his roles without needing theatrical intensity. As viewers revisited the series, they often sensed this authenticity, even if they could not explain it. Many fans wrote letters or shared stories about how Festus reminded them of someone real, a relative, a neighbor, or even themselves. These reactions matter more to Curtis than critical praise. They confirmed that his work had meaning beyond entertainment. When conversations turned toward conflicts or tensions on set, Curtis reportedly showed little interest in correcting rumors. He understood that stories grow over time, often becoming exaggerated. Rather than fight them, he let his work speak. This choice sometimes allowed misleading narratives to form, but also preserved his peace. Curtis valued privacy and believed that not every truth needed public explanation. In today's media environment, where every disagreement is magnified, his approach feels almost foreign. Yet it is precisely this restraint that makes his story compelling. Curtis represents a generation of performers who viewed acting as a job, not a platform for constant self-expression. They believed professionalism meant showing up, doing the work, and leaving personal matters off camera. This mindset often clashes with modern expectations, leading to misunderstandings when people look back through a contemporary lens. By recognizing this difference, audiences can better appreciate who Curtis really was. His legacy is not one of controversy, but of consistency. He remained true to himself in an industry that constantly pressures people to change. In doing so, he left behind something rare, a body of work that feels honest, comforting, and timeless. Long after debates about feuds fade, it is this enduring sense of authenticity that will continue to define Ken Curtis in the hearts of viewers. I end the final stage of Ken Curtis's life. Health became a quiet but serious concern, much like many of the challenges he faced away from the public eye. Unlike today's culture of constant updates and public disclosures, Curtis belonged to a generation that treated illness as a private matter. He did not seek sympathy, nor did he use his condition to draw attention. To most fans, he still appeared strong and steady whenever he was seen at events or in public. Behind closed door, however, the physical toll of age and years of hard work slowly made itself known. Long hours on set, demanding travel schedules, and the strain of performing stunts in Western productions had placed pressure on his body over decades. Still, Curtis rarely complained. Those close to him said he accepted physical limitations with the same calm dignity he showed throughout his life. His wife, Tori, played a central role during this period, helping him manage his health while maintaining a sense of normalcy. Together, they focused on routines that brought comfort rather than worry. Simple mornings, shared meals, quiet conversations, and familiar surroundings became more valuable than any professional achievement. Curtis remained mentally sharp and reflective, often looking back on his career with gratitude rather than regret. When asked about fame, he would gently shift the conversation toward people, relationships, and moments that mattered most to him. He understood that his time in the spotlight had passed, and he was at peace with that reality. This acceptance allowed him to enjoy life without chasing relevance or recognition. As his health declined, Curtis continued to embody the same principles that guided him earlier: self-respect, humility, and restraint. He did not attempt dramatic comebacks or public farewells. Instead, he allowed life to slow naturally. When he passed away in 1991, it came quietly without scandal or spectacle. This ending reflected the man he had always been. Ken Curtis left the world the same way he lived in it, steadfast, private, and grounded. His final years remind us that dignity is not found in noise or attention, but in how one faces life's inevitable changes with grace. A.S. discussions about Ken Curtis often circle back to claims that he named actors he disliked. It is important to approach this subject with care and balance. Stories like these tend to grow louder after a person is gone, when they can no longer clarify their words or intent. In Curtis's case, There is no verified record of him publicly listing people he hated. What exists instead are second-hand accounts, interpretations, and assumptions shaped by modern storytelling habits that favor conflict over nuance. Curtis lived in a professional world where disagreements were handled quietly, often through distance rather than confrontation. Choosing not to work with someone again did not automatically mean hatred. It often meant differing values, creative approaches, or personal boundaries. Unfortunately, over time, these normal professional decisions can be reshaped into dramatic narratives. Curtis understood this risk and largely avoided feeding it. He believed that speaking negatively about others served little purpose and often created more harm than truth. When he did express dissatisfaction, it was usually framed around fairness, respect, and professionalism rather than personal dislike. This distinction matters because it reveals the kind of man he was. Curtis valued integrity over gossip. He was more concerned with how he conducted himself than how he was perceived. In an industry built on image, this attitude was both rare and quietly powerful. Viewers who revisit his interviews notice how carefully he chose his words, often pausing before answering sensitive questions. This was not hesitation born of fear, but thoughtfulness shaped by experience. He knew that words, once spoken, take on lives of their own. By remaining measured, he protected not only others, but also his own peace. This approach may disappoint audiences hoping for shocking revelations, but offers something more meaningful, an example of maturity. Curtis showed that one does not need to air every grievance to live authentically. His life encourages a different kind of reflection, one that values understanding over accusation. When stripped of exaggeration, the story of Ken Curtis is not about hatred, but about navigating a complex industry while holding on to personal principles. This perspective allows us to honor his memory without distorting it for entertainment. When looking at Ken Curtis's life as a whole, it becomes clear that his story fits better as a lesson than a controversy. He entered Hollywood without illusions of glamour, worked steadily without demanding constant attention, and left behind a legacy built on consistency rather than chaos. In an era when fame is often measured by noise, Curtis stands as a reminder that lasting impact comes from quiet reliability. His portrayal of Festus Hagen did not rely on dramatic speeches or exaggerated heroism, but on warmth, humor, and honesty. These qualities reflected Curtis himself. He understood ordinary people because he came from ordinary beginnings, and that understanding shaped every performance he gave. While rumors about disliked co-workers may attract clicks, they fail to capture what truly mattered in his life. Curtis cared about doing his job well, being treated fairly, and treating others with respect. When those standards were not met, he chose distance over drama. This choice may appear cold to some, but it was rooted in self-awareness. He knew his limits and protected them. As audiences revisit his work today, many find comfort in its simplicity. In a world that feels increasingly rushed and divided, Curtis's performances offer a slower, steadier rhythm. They remind viewers that strength does not need to be loud to be real. His life also challenges modern viewers to reconsider how we judge people from the past. Applying today's expectations to yesterday's values often leads to misunderstanding. Curtis lived by principles common to his generation: privacy, restraint, and professionalism. Recognizing this context allows for a fairer appreciation of who he was. Ultimately, Ken Curtis should be remembered not for rumored grudges, but for the quiet confidence with which he lived and worked. His story encourages us to look beyond headlines and listen more carefully to actions and words. In doing so, we honor both the man and the timeless character he gave the world. As the story of Ken Curtis reaches its natural close, what remains strongest is not controversy, but clarity. His life shows that a person does not need to explain every choice for it to be meaningful. Curtis trusted that time would reveal the truth more gently than arguments ever could. He allowed his actions, his work, and his consistency to form the final record. This patience is rare, especially in industries driven by attention and reaction. Yet it served him well. Decades after his passing, people still speak his name with affection rather than confusion. They remember Festus's crooked hat, dry humor, and loyal heart more than any rumor attached to Curtis himself. That is the power of authentic work. It outlives speculation. Curtis also reminds us that professionalism does not mean emotional distance, but emotional control. He felt deeply, cared strongly, and believed firmly, yet chose restraint over exposure. In doing so, he preserved not only his dignity, but also the dignity of those around him. His example challenges modern audiences to slow down, listen carefully, and question stories designed to provoke rather than inform. When we revisit the idea that Curtis named actors he hated, it becomes less important than understanding why such stories emerge at all. They often reflect our desire for drama more than the reality of a person's life. Curtis's true story resists that impulse. It asks for patience, context, and respect. In the end, Ken Curtis stands as a figure shaped not by conflict, but by character. His journey encourages us to value substance over sensation and truth over attention. By remembering him this way, we ensure that his legacy remains as steady and honest as the man himself.